Good morning. Seems like my time started to tick, so thanks for coming. This session is going to be about site mailboxes. Should you be interested in a different topic, now is the time to jump up, run out, find the right room. My name is Alfons Derek. I'm a product manager lead working on site mailboxes. And usually the way I do these presentations is very interactive, so I will have a lot of demos. I actually encourage people to ask questions during the presentation and then try to answer them. It's a little harder with a room like that, especially for the folks up there. Like, I won't be able to understand your questions. If you want to move down, we can do it interactive. You can ask questions. Otherwise, I will probably have to ignore anything that comes from higher up in the rows. The way this talk is structured is that I will start on the end user side of things. So I will show the end user experience, very high level, probably like 100 level, and then successively go deeper into what it means for setting up site mailboxes, provisioning site mailboxes, and what it means for different configurations and what the requirements are. So we'll probably go down to a 200, 300-ish level throughout the presentation. Again, if you have any questions, please ask them as high or deep as you want. So, key takeaways, site mailboxes. Who knows what a site mailbox is? Quick show of hand. 1, 2, okay. Who actually uses a site mailbox already or has played with it? 1, 2, 2, 3, okay. That's good. So site mailboxes are designed for project teams. They are a way for project teams, small teams, to work together on deliverables against a certain deadline. They are brand new with Office 2013 or Office 365 in its current version. We just introduced them, so I'm not that surprised that only a few people worked with them already. The basic idea of a site mailbox is, for the project team, they bring emails and documents together in one view for the end user. And that was a very strong feedback we heard for a long time from customers that, hey, Microsoft, you guys build SharePoint, and that's great for documents, and you build Exchange, and that's great for emails, but actually I don't care about documents or emails. What I care about is my project, and a project always consists of content, deliverables, and the related communication. So please, 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 please bring it together finally. That's what we tried with site mailboxes, and I will show what the end user experience is for that. Site mailboxes can be provisioned and managed by end users. That's a big change in philosophy. Up to now, up to site mailboxes, end users have not been able to provision a store in Exchange. End users were not able to provision a mailbox of any type. With site mailboxes, they can actually do it. And that means for you as IT admins that if you enable site mailboxes, a bunch of mailboxes will pop up, and you have to think about how to manage them and what that means for your setup and your organization. In order to help you with that, site mailboxes support policies as to who can actually provision them, who can work with them, what the quota should be, what the life cycle should be, when they should be deleted, and so on and so forth. And we will talk a little bit about that, but if you have deeper questions, just feel free to ask them. And I mentioned in the beginning that I will talk about setup a little bit. The easiest way to get started with a site mailbox, even if you just want to experience how it works and what the usability and user experience is to go to Office 365, just get a test tenant, and just play with the site mailbox there. And that's actually what I will be doing in my demo. It's just an external test tenant, demo tenant that I had on Office 365. And it's a super easy way to get started and play with it. So I mentioned site mailboxes are a new concept in Exchange. So I wanted to spend a minute or two to actually compare them with existing shared stores in Exchange and position where we think a site mailbox is the right solution as to where a different type of mailbox is the right solution. Site mailboxes, as I mentioned, are designed for a defined set of people working together against a shared purpose or goal. They work on deliverables. They need access to content, that is emails and documents, and we bring that together. Shared mailbox is pretty close to that. The main difference between a shared mailbox and a site mailbox is a shared mailbox is usually used to act as a virtual identity, helpdesk@microsoft.com. for instance. So a shared mailbox would have an email address that external customers or internal customers could send email to, and then a team of people will respond to those emails as the virtual entity, as helpdesk@microsoft.com. Shared mailboxes don't have any support for documents. They're really helping a bunch of people who are in the know to pretend to be somebody else, being that virtual entity. Then we have public folders. Public folders is more of what my picture for public folders is always the library for the enterprise. Public folders by default are accessible to everyone in the org. It's like a huge, huge library where communication content, emails are stored, and everybody can browse them and find content. The main difference, or one of the big differences to site mailboxes and shared mailboxes is public folders has a hierarchy, and everybody can basically click through that hierarchy and find that content that he or she is interested in, even if I'm not part of a specific team. For a shared mailbox or a site mailbox, you have to be a member of the team, or you will never be able to get to the content. Like either you are a defined member of the site mailbox and shared mailbox, and then you have full access, or you're not, then the best you can see of the site mailbox is the email address in the global address list. And then on the far end, just for sake of completeness, distribution lists. Distribution lists actually is not a shared store in Exchange, as you know, but it is a way of delivering emails to somebody's inbox. But still, it's mentioned in the same context, and people get confused between site mailbox and shared mailbox and distribution lists. So that's a very quick high-level overview of the different stores and what we think a site mailbox would be the right solution to be used. So the best way to actually explain site mailboxes is to look at them and to play with them a little bit. And I'm going to start with a demo that shows the end-user experiences for site mailboxes. So working with a site mailbox for an end user, what does it look like? And it's certainly true for Microsoft. It's probably also true for your enterprise, where we spend most of our time during the day is in Outlook. I heard a number sometime that 80% of the time a knowledge worker, like during their business time, is actually working in Outlook and with Outlook. So for site mailboxes, we wanted to make sure that we have a great representation in Outlook of the site mailbox experience. And what you can see is I have my favorites up here, and I have a bunch of new nodes and mailboxes that show up down here. And those are actually all site mailboxes. If I click on any of them, they will expand. You will see that site mailboxes have an inbox with emails. They have a folder with documents. And they have, of course, junk emails and deleted items. The inbox, as you might imagine, has all the emails that were shared with the team with the site mailbox. And the documents folder have all the documents, or I should say a representation of all the documents that sit on the linked SharePoint site. And we will talk about that a lot more, like what that actually means. And then, of course, if that document library on the SharePoint site has subfolders, we will also see representations of those subfolders. So by clicking on a site mailbox, I can expand into both the emails that are stored on Exchange as well as the documents that are actually stored on SharePoint. If I care very much about a specific document library, it's very easy to keep that in focus for me all the time by just saying, okay, I want to add that document library to my favorites. Now what we've done here is actually in Outlook, in the email client, we added a SharePoint document library to my favorites, which means I will immediately see if anything changed up here, like if any of those were opened, were changed, a new version was uploaded, I will immediately see my read-unread counter change. So that's very easy for me because now I don't have to go back to my 5 project sites on SharePoint and check if documents were changed or new documents were uploaded. I just look in Outlook. I just look in my favorite section up here, and if something changes, I will see it immediately. If I know that I've taken care of all of that, I just reset the counter to 0. So super easy way for me to keep track of all the communications in my site mailboxes and SharePoint sites as well as the documents. Of course, I can also go at any time to one of those site mailboxes and say, I want to see the SharePoint site. I want to do more than just looking at the documents. I want to maybe see a timeline for the project. I want to see a task list. So just go to Outlook, I right-click on that document library, and I say Open in Web Browser. And that will now open the SharePoint site that's connected to the site mailbox. And here you can see the SharePoint site has a documents library, it has a news feed, it has a schedule, a timeline, and it has a document library, which again has a few subfolders. And the exact same representation that I see over here in that document library is also given down here in Outlook. So I see all the documents, I see the ones I haven't checked yet, and I can very easily open any document from right here by double-clicking on the document, again in Outlook, and it will open the document in the specific application. Of course, if I have site mailboxes that I don't need anymore, you probably already ask yourself the question, okay, over time it probably gets a little bit crowded down here. So what do I do with those that I don't need anymore? I can just right-click, close the site mailbox, and it goes away from Outlook. The important thing here is I'm not actually doing anything to the content. I'm just changing the view that I have in my personal Outlook client. I'm just telling my personal Outlook client not to show that specific site mailbox anymore. And if at any time I would decide that I actually do want to show it again, I can again go in Outlook. I can right-click on my personal mailbox and select that new function, Manage All Site Mailboxes, which will lead me to a web page in Exchange, in the Exchange admin portal. And over there, show me the list of all the site mailboxes that I am a member or owner of, and allow me very easily to select which ones to show in Outlook. At this point, I should probably mention that there is a limit how many you can show at any given time in Outlook, and that limit is 10. And it's pretty much a usability limit. When we developed site mailboxes and we did usability testing, we just saw that if you have more than 10, it's really, really hard to keep track on what's going on. The list just gets too long, you keep scrolling. So 10 is sort of the sweet spot of how many it makes sense to show. If you get added to a new site mailbox, it will show automatically in Outlook until you have hit that limit of 10. After that, you can close any site mailbox from Outlook and be able to repin any site mailbox that you want from the ECP page. So this is how site mailboxes are shown in your Outlook client. It's very easy, it's very integrated. But other than seeing all the documents that you have in Outlook, actually and being able to double-click on any of those and opening it from Outlook, actually you didn't get a lot of value yet, I think. So what is the end user experience actually working with site mailboxes? What can you do once you have a site mailbox? And I want to walk you through a typical scenario that I have every day at work, which is in my inbox, I got a bunch of new emails. They're all related to some project, and I have to deal with them. To some, I want to respond right away. Others, I just want to share. And some I don't actually care a lot about, like this one. But thanks, Andrew. So let's see. I have a site mailbox. Having a site mailbox, as soon as I get added to a site mailbox, means I get an invite email for that site mailbox. The invite email basically gives me the core information about the site mailbox. What's its email address that I can send new emails to, and what's the SharePoint site that's related and linked to that site mailbox. And then also some additional information if I want to learn more about site mailboxes. So let's ignore this one for now. Here's an email that's a little more interesting. Team kickoff. Yep, that sounds like it's something that should be shared with the team and kept for the team. So what I can do is I can just go to Fiscal Report. This is the site mailbox I'm working on right now. And I take that email that I want to share and just drag and drop it here. Very simple, very straightforward. I just added or archived the email into that site mailbox, which means now if other members come in, they will see their unread count has increased. They see that new emails are in the site mailbox, and they can easily check that information. That's That's important and interesting for a couple of reasons. One is it's an easy way to get stuff out of your inbox and into that shared space where people only go when they actually work on that specific project. So when you're actually focused on that project, you go to that space and it has all the information you care about. You don't have to archive stuff yourself in your personal mailbox because you do it project-specific in the site mailbox. You also have much better knowledge management because now, as an organization, you get important IP content out of users' personal mailboxes where it's not accessible to you into a shared space that is managed by IT where it's accessible to the org and can be retrieved again. And it's also for teams super helpful because usually in teams, members join the team later on, like after the kickoff, and they've missed a lot of communication and a lot of content and background. So when a new member joins a team with a site mailbox, all he or she needs to do is go to the site mailbox, read bottom to top, and they're up to date on what was discussed so far. There's no more, let me find that email and forward it to you, that teams needed in the past. So we saw drag and drop. Of course, on a site mailbox, you can also just reply all, add the site mailbox, and share it with the site mailbox by that. A site mailbox has an email address, it's addressable. You can, for instance, think about adding a site mailbox to a distribution list for a team, and by that making sure that you have a paper trail or an archive of all the discussions and all the communications that happened with that team. So everybody can go back to that content. Nobody has to keep it in their personal mailboxes. This will actually reduce your storage requirements quite a bit if it's really used in the enterprise. So we took care of that. There's another one. This one has an attachment. Contoso Tech Investor Relations Stack. Andrew wants some feedback from me. I actually hate that. I hate getting attachments in emails and then having to make changes offline, sending them back, and somebody else also made changes, and I never know if my changes will make it in or not. And it's just a nightmare. You have those many versions of a document, and they never get consolidated again. So I actually want to use this as a teaching opportunity for Andrew. How about I take this attachment and just drag and drop it into the site mailbox? And what you can see now is that there's a new document up there, but it's in italics, and that means it's pending publish. We dragged and dropped it from the inbox to the OST in Outlook. It's there as a document. Outlook will send it to Exchange. Exchange then will turn around and talk to SharePoint and publish the document in the SharePoint library. So one of the core principles we wanted to make sure with site mailboxes is that we keep content in the system that's optimized for that type of content. Emails need to stay in Exchange. Documents need to stay in SharePoint because SharePoint has all the versioning, the co-authoring, like a bunch of functionality for documents. So you can see the document now turned to a bolded font, which means it was actually successfully published on SharePoint and was committed back to Exchange. Now all I really have here in my Outlook client is a link to that document on the SharePoint side. I don't have the actual document content. I just have metadata and a link to the SharePoint side. And that, again, is because we wanted to make sure that we're leveraging all the functionality in SharePoint, that we do give you the co-authoring support and the versioning support that you have if you use a SharePoint side. So if I double-click on that document, you will see that it actually didn't open from the SharePoint side. Very interesting. Must have opened it somewhere else. So what it should do is it should turn around, go to the SharePoint side, open it from there, and show you the version that fully supports co-authoring. The beauty is once I have it here, I said I wanted to make this a teachable moment for Andrew. I can just send email to Andrew and say, hey, this is a better way for co-auth. And what I did is I just right-clicked on the document, just selected forward, and it will now not forward the document, but it will forward a link to the document on the SharePoint side. So once I put it on the SharePoint side and people use the site mailbox, we will keep them on the SharePoint side as to their document changes. There's no more versioning nightmare, multiple changes that need to be merged together. it's all happening against the one version of the truth, which is on the SharePoint side. When I gave that presentation the first time, I had an interesting question. The interesting question was, okay, that's cool, like I can forward a document, but I usually don't forward one document. I want to have feedback on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 documents. How do I do that? Do I now need to send 5 emails? And back then I couldn't really answer the question, so I did some investigation and research. And the way you do it is you can actually drag and drop as many documents as you want into any email, and it will just create links for it. So it's a very, very consistent, very easy way of getting people to use SharePoint for the documents and then staying in SharePoint and not doing other funny stuff. Okay, so I took care of this one. Hopefully teaching moment for Andrew. The last thing I want to show is, of course, since we publish those documents onto SharePoint, there's a bunch of additional things you can do once they're there. I already talked about versioning and co-authoring. This is an email, and the email usually should stay in Exchange. Usually if you want to have thread support and all the richness of Exchange, you want to make sure that people publish emails into the inbox of a site mailbox such that they stay in Exchange and they stay active, living email objects. However, sometimes there are situations where you actually want to, and I'm quoting a customer, where you actually want to kill an email. And by that, the customer meant, for compliance reasons, sometimes you don't want that email to be an email. What they're actually doing is they're printing it in PDF, or their process is even funnier. They're printing it and then scanning it back in such that they have PDF. With a site mailbox, you have an easier way of doing that. If I really want to kill this email and turn it into a document, all I need to do is take the email and drag and drop it on the Documents folder. So you see the email here. Again, it's in italics. So we're now pending publish to the SharePoint side. Exchange is turning around, using that email, sending it to SharePoint, having it published there as an MSG file, and then returning me the link to that email once it has been published. So if I go to the SharePoint site, again, right-click, open in web browser, and to the Documents folder on that SharePoint site, I will see that email that I've just published. And since it's SharePoint, I can now even declare the record. And you can see that it has this little log sign. So what I just did in a few seconds, 3 or 4 clicks, I guess, is I had an email that had important legal content that I wanted to bring into my compliance workflow. So I just dragged and dropped it from my inbox into a site mailbox. It was published on the SharePoint side. And I did one more step, which was on the SharePoint side. I declared it a record, and by that made it immutable. Nobody in my team can delete that email anymore. Nobody in my team can alter that email anymore. It is now a record, and if I have a records management workflow and system attached to SharePoint, it will be part of that records management workflow. So super easy for me to actually turn an email into one of those immutable records. Excuse me? Oh, it's an MSG file. So when I double-click on that guy, it looks like that. Like any other MSG file that you stored in the SharePoint side. So before I jump out of that demo and back into my PowerPoint slide, there's one more thing I didn't show before. And that is, I mentioned a couple of times, but I want to mention it again because it's super important. Exchange is not storing the actual documents. Outlook is not storing the actual documents. Exchange is just storing a link to the document on the SharePoint side. Outlook only has the link to that document and metadata, like the last modified author, the last modified date, document title, document size. So if I were offline and I would double-click on any of those documents, nothing would happen. They couldn't open. So the way to take documents offline if you use site mailboxes is on the SharePoint site, and you guys probably know that. You can click the sync button, and then the SharePoint site's document library will take into Office Document Cache, and you will have an offline version of all the documents. Office Document Cache also supports co-authoring and versioning, which means inside mailboxes, if you take the documents offline, that way you're not losing any of the rich functionality that SharePoint is giving you. You can still co-author with many people offline, and then changes get merged back automatically. So it's very, very powerful for end users. Okay. Question? Okay. Question was, what happens if multiple people send the same email, or I assume drag and drop the same email to the site mailbox? What happens? There are two answers to that question. The first answer is the current behavior. Currently, if 3 people file the same email into a site mailbox, you have 3 copies of it. It will show as a thread, but you have 3 copies. Pretty soon, we will provide the ability to define what the behavior should be between just do it as we do it now. You have 3 copies if 3 people file, or dedupe, which means the first filing action will succeed, all the others will fail silently. So number 2 and 3 will fail, but users won't know. If they go to the site mailbox, they will just see that one version of the email. Great question. Thank you. Okay. Let's go back to the deck and, oh, there's one more question.
Email on the inbox with an attachment. Still just an email with an attachment on the inbox.
Awesome question. That's why I like the interactive sessions. You guys always remind me of the stuff I forget to tell. Email with an attachment dragged and dropped into the inbox will remain an email with an attachment. So we made a conscious design decision to not rip anything out of emails and try to guess whether you wanted to publish on the SharePoint site, because we actually cannot guess what the user intention is. So if you just drag and drop email with attachment, you have email with attachment. If you want the attachment into the SharePoint library, you take the document and drag and drop that. What's the capacity size of what? Oh, what's the quota of a site mailbox? It's defined by the IT administrator. That's one of the settings you can do. Excuse me, one of the policy settings you can do on a site mailbox. Basically, it's just a mailbox, so you can make it as big as any mailbox you want. Yeah. So if you have, what is the quota in 365? It's the same as a personal mailbox. So for Office 365, that's true. That's the statement. Actually, if you are in an on-premise environment, I think I would encourage you to make the quota smaller, because there really isn't a need for a big quota in a site mailbox for a couple of reasons. First of all, a site mailbox is very specific to a project. Like, this is not you getting emails from 50 different distribution lists. And secondly, you should not, although we support it, you should not have attachments in the inbox. You should have the attachments on the SharePoint side. So we are actually internally having site mailboxes with very small quotas to encourage that behavior. Okay, one more question, and then I guess I flip to slides, and we can come back to questions again. Good question. Site mailboxes on my sites are not the typical scenario. So I wouldn't do that. I would have a dedicated SharePoint site for a project, just like any other site you have, and attach the site mailbox to that. There. Oh, question is, do you have to enable My Sites to use that feature? No, you can totally use your My Site to use this feature. I would not encourage it, though, because the email address for the site mailbox is generated automatically depending on what the display name of your site is. So you end up with having two Alphonses in the gal. One is the Alphonse, the real one, and the other one is the Alphonse side mailbox, and people start sending emails to the wrong one. So I wouldn't do it. Okay, let's flip to the presentation, and then again, let's come back to questions as we go through the content. So, quick summary of the architecture. I already talked to it, but it's to me it's always useful to see a picture. Site mailbox is a virtual merged view of things that are stored on a SharePoint site and in the Exchange server. All the emails, everything that you drag and drop into Inbox goes to Exchange, is stored only there. All the documents, everything you drop on the Documents folder goes to SharePoint and is only stored there. However, membership, owners, members, are the same for both stores. So you manage membership only in one place. That place is SharePoint, and then it applies also to the Exchange server. Anybody who is added to the owners or members group on a SharePoint site, if that site has a site mailbox, he's automatically added to the members and owners of the site mailbox. Provisioning happens from the SharePoint site, and I will show in just a moment how that actually works and what that looks like. Lifecycle is also defined by the SharePoint site. SharePoint has that new functionality in 2013 where you can define a lifecycle policy for the whole site. So you can define for the whole site when the site will be closed, when it will be deleted, and when it goes away. And I will show how you do that. The same lifecycle applies to the site mailbox. So you don't delete a site mailbox separately, you don't close it separately. By closing the SharePoint site, by deleting the SharePoint site, you will also close and delete the site mailboxes. And that's independent of whether that close delete happens through a policy or manually. And then end users, IWs, talk to the site mailbox through their clients, either SharePoint in the web interface or Outlook from the Outlook client, of course. We also talked about that one, but I wanted to re-emphasize because it's super important and I get that question very, very often. Exchange does not store the document. Outlook does not store the document. All that Exchange and Outlook is storing after the publishing process is a reference, a shortcut, a link to the document, and metadata. So if a user interacts with the document in Outlook, if he double-clicks on a document, all Outlook does is it passes the URL to the respective application, the Office application, and then the Office application will look either whether there's a local version in the document cache or go to the SharePoint server and open the document from there. Again, if you need an offline story, you need to take the SharePoint library, the documents offline, and then the app will find the document in the local cache. And then the document is opened, and the client application works directly against the SharePoint server. So documents are never, ever stored in Outlook and Exchange except for the publishing flow. Okay, we talked a bunch about site mailboxes in Outlook. The important question is, what do you actually need in order to get a site mailbox into Outlook? And that also touches a little bit of IT questions that you might have, help desk questions that you might be getting when users think they should see a site mailbox, but they don't. Or they think they should see a specific library, but they don't. So site mailboxes in Outlook. In order to show site mailboxes in Outlook, your personal mailbox has to be on Exchange 2013. You can still interact with a site mailbox if you're on a down-level version of Exchange, but you cannot do it from Outlook. You can only do it through the SharePoint site. So you have to be on Exchange 2013, and you have to use Outlook Professional Plus 2013. Those are, like, from a client point of view, the two requirements in order to interact with site mailboxes. Then, for you to actually show in Outlook, you need to be a member or an owner of the SharePoint site. And you need to be a member or owner of the SharePoint site as an individual user. So if you're just a member of a security group that happens to be in the member or owner list of a SharePoint site, you will not see a site mailbox. You have to make sure that you are there as an individual user. And the reason for that is we're synchronizing membership from the SharePoint server to Exchange, and we can only do that for objects that we recognize, which is the individual users. And then once you add it as a member, the site mailbox will just automatically pop in your Outlook client. SharePoint document libraries, and this is not library, it's libraries, are synced to the site mailbox if they show up in the quick launch menu. And just for those of you guys who are more Exchange guys than SharePoint guys, what I mean by that is this menu here. So if your SharePoint site has multiple document libraries, you can decide which ones you want to actually sync to a site mailbox by pinning them to the quick launch list. You can have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, how many you want, synced over to the site mailbox and then show in Outlook. So it's also important for users to know you're not limited to the one default document library list that every SharePoint site has. You can just organize it the way you want. As long as you add it to the quick launch, it will show in Outlook. And then we already talked to that. Only specific metadata is synced to Exchange, mainly the link to the document, the name of the document, the size on the SharePoint site, who changed it and when did he change it, and is it checked out or not. If you want the full document, you have to take the SharePoint site offline. And then I mentioned membership and document sync a few times, but didn't really talk to it. So the way we're deciding what we need to show in Outlook is every now and then, Exchange will talk to SharePoint and ask SharePoint for updates as to did anything in the document library change, did anything on the owner list change, did anything on the member list change. And then we will reflect that in the site mailbox by creating those new document references or adding members and users. That whole syncing is usage-driven, which means site mailboxes that are actively worked with will be synced very often, every 5 minutes. Site mailboxes that are just sitting in Outlook will sync every 15 minutes, and site mailboxes that are not used at all because people moved away, everybody is out for the weekend or something like that, will be synced every 6 hours. Why is that important? It's important because if you get questions from users, you will know that membership, for instance, if somebody was added to a SharePoint site but the site mailbox doesn't show up for them or they don't get access, it should sync every 15 minutes if somebody else is using that. So if your problem persists longer than 15 minutes, you probably want to troubleshoot what's going on. Every 6 hours, everything must have been synced up. If you have a problem that persists more than 6 hours, it's either not sync related or your sync process is broken. So that gives you some indication of where to look if things don't work as expected. Any question on that one? That slide kind of combines a bunch of things, and it's sort of important, I guess, to understand what's going on. Yep, there's a question up there. Inheritance. No problem. We're supporting inheritance as long as the users are added as individual users.
So if they don't have permission in the library in SharePoint, won't show up with a quick launch, will then not show up in Outlook as well?
Sorry, I didn't understand the first part of the question.
So if a library has a broken inheritance, the user doesn't have permission in that library, it won't show up with a quick launch.
Oh.
Will that reflect in Outlook as well?
I see. Good question. So the question was if let me rephrase the question and tell me if I got it right. The question was if I have a SharePoint site that has a certain list of owners and members, but I've broken inheritance for those permissions on the document library level, who will see it in Outlook? Everybody who has access to the site will see the document library in Outlook. So even if I don't have permissions to the document library because inheritance was broken, I will see it in Outlook. I will not be able to publish any documents there, delete any documents there, open any documents because I don't have permissions to the actual document, but I will see the list. So if the list contains, you shouldn't do it such that I can derive confidential data from the display names of documents in that list. Great question. Okay, let's move on. Let's do a little more demoing. And let's talk about our demo creation and lifecycle management for site mailbox. So how do I actually create one of those things? We saw how I can work with them, but and I mentioned in my introduction that with site mailboxes, end users can actually create mailboxes in Exchange. So let's look at what that flow would look like for a user. It always starts with a SharePoint site. Site mailboxes, as I mentioned, are completely managed from SharePoint. So I want to make sure I start with a new site. Let's call it TechEd 2013. And what you can see here is, as I create a new site, as an end user from that end user flow, in my demo, in my example, I'm actually required to pick a lifecycle policy. And that is something that IT can set, and I will show what it looks like in just a few minutes. So I cannot create just any site that lives forever, but I'm required to pick a policy and define what type of work I want to store in that site. So let's say this is high business impact projects. That sounds pretty important. And let's create the site. So step number 1, create a site. Step number 2, don't let it go wrong. Let's try again. Okay. We give it a third time and then we move on. Okay. So I guess my tenant doesn't like me right now. Anyways, step number 1 is you create a SharePoint site. Once you have created a SharePoint site, you don't have a site mailbox yet. Basically, all you have is a plain site that looks pretty much like what you see here on the display. You will have that carousel up there that shows you the most important actions you can do with a new site. One of those carousel tiles is keep email in context. And when you click on that, and you didn't do that before, you're now actually starting the provisioning process for a site mailbox. So that will show you a screen that tells you, hey, a site mailbox is provisioned on the Exchange server. Hold on tight, come back in 15 minutes, and we will have the site mailbox. Unfortunately, I cannot show you that step right now because it won't let me create a new SharePoint site. But that's the flow. You create the site. You click on Keep Email in Context. That provisions a site mailbox. And then the next time you click on Mailbox, you will actually go to that overview and see the actual content of that site mailbox. And here you see the same emails that you would also see in Outlook. You also notice that a new link was added to Quick Launch. So by clicking here on Mailbox, users now again go to the content of that mailbox in Exchange in an overview. And I mentioned before that you can work with a site mailbox from down-level clients. You don't have to be on Exchange 2013 with your personal mailbox. You don't have to have Outlook Professional Pro Plus. That's the way you would interact with a mailbox, site mailbox if you are on a down-level client. You can always go to the SharePoint site. You can always click on Mailbox, and you can always see all the communications that were shared with that specific site mailbox through the OA interface. You just don't get it in your Outlook 2013. Okay, so that's one way of provisioning. The other way of provisioning for your users who are more living in Outlook, which is probably everybody in your organization, we also added a way where IT can configure a way to create new site mailboxes right from Outlook. By default, that menu action doesn't show, but you can set up your organization such that users get that ability. And when you click on that link, what actually happens is you get redirected to a self-service provisioning template on SharePoint, and that can look whatever you want it to look like. This is just a default self-service provisioning template that I'm showing here, but for your organization, you would probably have a customized workflow that you want to use that then makes sure that sites are provisioned in the right place and with the right properties. So very easy for users to once they learn about site mailboxes, know how to use them, just from Outlook, create a new one. The last thing I wanted to show here was policies. As you remember, when I clicked on provisioning, I did get that selection of policies from SharePoint. And that is something, again, that you as IT admins can define for your organization. And you need to do that in two places. First one is from the admin console for SharePoint. You need to go to Settings, and in Settings, you define what the self-service provisioning experience is for your users. And by default, users don't have to select a policy, so that field wouldn't even show. But you can set it up such that a policy is a required choice. And in that case, a user, when they create a new SharePoint site, always have to pick a policy. And that is your way of ensuring that you're not ending up in the problem that many, many IT organizations are in, where you have all that old legacy historic content and you have no idea whether you can delete it or not. This ensures that after a certain time, content gets deleted unless end users take action. And that unless end users take action part is the second configuration you want to make. On any site, if you are an admin and go to the site settings and then top-level site settings, there's a new entry here with 2013, which is site policies. And site policies is where you define what shows in that policy picker that end users get. And you can create any new policy that you want. And you have a bunch of settings here as to what happens when certain timers are met. So X month, X years after creation, should a site be closed? Should the site owners get an email before that happens? Are they able to extend that period, or will it be closed anyways? X amount of months or years after closure, will the site be deleted? What happens? Can end users extend it? Will they get an email? So it's a very powerful way of controlling actually what happens with those stores that end users can now create in SharePoint and in Exchange. Because again, end users now create mailboxes in Exchange, and you want to make sure that you have a way of getting rid of them later on and not getting into the problem where you have a bunch of legacy data and you have no idea which ones you can safely delete and which ones you cannot delete. So let's go back to PowerPoint and quickly talk about what we just saw. So we just talked about provisioning. Unfortunately, it didn't work in the demo, but trust me, usually it works. There are three ways of provisioning a site mailbox and a SharePoint site. One is the out-of-the-box experience. That's what I showed, which is you go to SharePoint in the browser, you create a new site, you click on the site mailbox tile in the carousel, the site mailbox gets provisioned, and there you are, off you go. The next best one is from Outlook, where you provide end users with a way to just right-click in Outlook and then go to a customized template for your organization that does it all together. It creates the SharePoint site, provisions the site mailbox, and they're done. Like it's a one-click action and entering the name of their SharePoint site. And then the third one, of course, which probably applies to a lot of you guys, is you already have business processes. You already have accounting systems that create stores in SharePoint. You already have workflows and backend systems that do that. And there's a programmatic way to create a SharePoint site and also create the site mailbox for that. And in my references, I will have a link to a blog post that explains exactly how you would do that. So 3 levels on how you can do it. Either out of the box, that's the worst experience, very easy for users. Second one, from Outlook, or you just make it part of your business processes and don't even show that to users at all. For lifecycle management, I showed how you set up a policy for lifecycle. Basically, what the lifecycle policy does is it brings the SharePoint site and the associated site mailbox through four stages. The creation is before the policy takes place, then the active usage, that's when people work with the site mailbox, everybody has full access. Then closure, which is basically in-place archive behavior, so people have read access to the SharePoint site. They will not see the site mailbox in Outlook anymore, but the content is still there. So you don't lose any content. You can always come back and reactivate a closed site mailbox. And then finally deletion, where the SharePoint site gets deleted, the site mailbox gets marked for deletion. And now here's an important distinction. If you are in Office 365, after the site mailbox gets marked for deletion, the mailbox will actually be deleted. If you are on-premise, the mailbox stays marked for deletion and stays marked for deletion until you manually delete it. So IT needs a process of manually deleting site mailboxes on-premise if you want to do that. And there's a reference on what the commandlets are that you need to use for that process. So it's active, it's closed, which is in-place archiving, and then it gets deleted. Last part of this presentation, end-user diagnostics, and this will be a fairly short demo. It basically shows a little bit about what end users might encounter and gives you some hints as to when you're supporting site mailboxes, what situations you might run into and what to think about. So I guess one of the most common issues users might probably run into is we talked about what happens if I'm publishing multiple emails. And I gave the answer that if multiple people are publishing the same emails, you will have duplicates of that email in the site mailbox, but nothing bad happens. It just shows as a threat. If people try to publish multiple documents, multiple versions of the same documents, multiple copies of the same documents, SharePoint will not support that. Like there's only, in any given document library, there's only one document with a given document name and extension. So SharePoint will reject that. What happens if I try to do that? You see I already have a document business updates in here, and I just dragged and dropped the same document. Exchange doesn't know about that versioning conflict yet, so the document is in pending publish. It looks good so far. Exchange is trying to go to SharePoint, take that document and publish it on the SharePoint server, but SharePoint will reject it because that document already exists. So there are a couple of things you will see as an end user. First one is, here in the document library view, the document magically disappeared, which is probably not the very best user experience. It's the best we could do, though. So in the document library, you don't see that your publish actually wasn't successful. But to make sure that we're not getting into data loss for the user, if you try to publish a document and it was not successful, we will send you an NDR. So we will make sure that in your inbox you are aware of your publishing did actually not work. And we will also attach the document to that NDR, because you might just have dragged and dropped the document on a document library, deleted your local copy, felt confident, and moved on. So we want to make sure that the user always has access to his local copy, even if publish failed. So the full document is here, and I always had access to it. The other thing where users can see if things didn't work quite as they expected is every site mailbox also has a sync issues folder. And the sync issues folder will have all the problems that happened in that site mailbox. So in the case of a failed publish, you will also see that in the sync issues folder. And again, the error message here will have a copy of the document to make sure that you're not encountering any data loss. So there will always be a way to get back to your document. Another common error that might happen is that you're trying to delete a document that you actually cannot delete, you're not supposed to delete. And I'm just picking the example of that email that I just published a few minutes ago to the SharePoint server and then turned into a record. So I'm not supposed to delete that email anymore because it's a record. However, from Outlook, since I'm working against the OST, my offline copy of that site mailbox, I can actually delete that document. Outlook now talks to Exchange, tells Exchange to delete the document. Exchange will turn around, go to SharePoint, and try to delete that document from the SharePoint document library. That, of course, will fail because the email was turned into a record, and then we will re-instantiate the reference to that document in Outlook. So you will see, there you go. You see it popping up again here in the document library. That's because first in that loosely coupled semi-offline situation, Outlook thought it was actually successful. We removed it, then we pulled it back. Again here, the challenge is you might not see that. You might already have moved on from that view into a different view. So you thought you deleted an embarrassing document, but it's still there. We want to make sure you're aware of that, and we send you again a NDR to your inbox so that you know that this important operation of deletion actually failed. You were not successful doing that. So, and those are the only two cases where we send NDRs. You try to publish it, but it failed. You try to delete, but it failed. If you want to get some more information about what's going on in your site mailbox, we also have site mailbox properties on right-click, which will lead you to a detailed page of that site mailbox that shows what the owners and the members are on that site mailbox, what the email address is, the SharePoint URL, owners and members that we synced from SharePoint. So if you ever get any help desk calls like, hey, I'm on the SharePoint site, I can get to the SharePoint site, but I cannot get to the site mailbox, this is a good place to check. Most likely the user was not added as an individual user, but through a security group, or not to the owner and member group, but some other group. So here's a good place to check. There's also sync status, where you will see when the last sync happened on that site mailbox and whether it was successful or not. Users can manually kick off a sync from here if they think they need to, and they can even annoy you guys by sending you error details if sync was not successful. So it's an easy way of copy-pasting more details about the error and then sending and sharing it to IT. And here's the diagnostics info that I just sent to myself, and that will then help IT to figure out what's going on if things fail. So end users have a few ways of figuring out what's going on and maybe what's going wrong. And then, of course, IT can always dig deeper with commandlets. This is a slide that shows sort of the common things that can go wrong with a site mailbox. And it's pretty much actually the set we're seeing internally as we're working with site mailboxes that actually happen. Document fails to upload. We already talked about that. Document cannot be deleted. I showed that as well in the demo. And certain members don't see the site mailbox. Again, here, make sure members are added as individual users and they're added to the owner or member group, and then you should be good. Here's a list of IT admin tools. For provisioning, probably less likely unless you want to use provisioning systems to set up your site mailboxes. If you're on-premise, one of the trickiest parts of setting up a site mailbox will be the OAuth relationship between SharePoint and Exchange. We have a bunch of tools to help you set that up and diagnose it and test it if it shouldn't work the way you think it's supposed to work. There are some commandlets and tools to check the sync status and to kick off a manual sync if you need to. And there are also some tools to link and unlink a site mailbox. As I mentioned a couple of times, by default, site mailboxes are only managed through SharePoint. You create a site mailbox, you got it, you delete the site mailbox gets deleted, it's gone. There is a way, if you have to, for troubleshooting and diagnostics, to unlink a site a site mailbox from a SharePoint site, and here's a commandlet to do that. You basically link it to a null pointer URL, and then you have a site mailbox that's not linked to any SharePoint site, and you can link it to a different one. I would be careful with that, and really use it if you need it for troubleshooting. And then I mentioned that if you're on-premise, as part of the lifecycle, we're not actually deleting site mailboxes, but we're just marking them for deletion, and then IT needs to, depending on your requirements and policies, run a script every now and then and look for all those site mailboxes that are marked for deletion and actually delete them. And there's a this is the command that you would use to do that. There's a question back there? The question is there a way to enable journaling on a site mailbox? Not that I know of. So I don't think so. Okay. So deployment considerations, and we're almost through. So stick with me. Version requirements. In order to enable site mailboxes, you have to have SharePoint and Exchange on the version 2013. Both workloads need to be on 2013. And that's for the servers that host the site mailbox. If users, I mentioned that before, if users want to access those site mailboxes through Outlook, their personal mailbox also has to be on Exchange 2013, and they need to use Outlook Professional Pro 2013. But if you just want to try site mailboxes, if you want to roll them out like slowly, sequentially, it's actually enough to have a Exchange topology on 2013 and a SharePoint topology on 2013, and have those two talk, and everybody just goes and works with the site mailbox through the web browser. Cross-premise access, super important. SharePoint and Exchange server that are hosting the site mailbox need to be on the same premise. So you cannot have SharePoint on-premise and a Exchange server that's supposed to host a site mailbox for that SharePoint installation in the cloud or the other way. They both have to be in the cloud or on-premise. However, personal mailboxes can be cross-premise. So only because the SharePoint server and the Exchange server hosting the site mailbox are in the cloud doesn't mean that all the users need to be in the cloud. User mailboxes may be on-premise, and that works just fine. IT controls. When you configure site mailboxes for a given SharePoint farm, you point the SharePoint farm to a Exchange forest. And that's important because I get the question pretty often. I have 5 SharePoint farms, but only 2 Exchange forests. Is that a problem? It's not, because any given SharePoint farm points to one Exchange forest. Any other SharePoint farm can point to the same one. That's no problem. An Exchange forest can handle multiple SharePoint farms. It's not the other way around. And if that was unclear, please come down and we'll scribble it on the whiteboard. We provide a bunch of RBAC controls, RBAC rules that let you control which users can actually provision a site mailbox and which users can interact with a site mailbox. By default, everybody can do that. But if you wish to limit that in your organization, RBAC rules is the way to do it. And then we talked about quota right in the beginning. There's a site mailbox provisioning policy, which lets you define a quota for site mailboxes and a few other attributes. It's important to note that the policy is a provisioning policy, so it only applies at the moment when a mailbox is provisioned. If you had a site mailbox provisioning policy with a quota of 1 gigabyte today, then every site mailbox that is provisioned today will have 1 gigabyte. If you change it to 2 gigabytes tomorrow, every site mailbox that will be provisioned after tomorrow has 2 gigs, but the old ones still have 1. So it doesn't affect existing site mailboxes. That's a pretty packed slide. Any questions here? Yep, there's a question back there. What about retention? Good question. Retention policies or retention tags in the site mailbox are not supported. But what you can do is a site mailbox can be part of an e-discovery set and can be put on hold as part of the e-discovery. So you can put a site mailbox on hold. You can make it part of e-discovery. You don't have item level retention through retention tags in a site mailbox. Okay, site mailbox resources. There are a bunch of articles on the web already. Some good reading. So if you have any questions, check those links out. They should help you. Related content. There are some labs here. If you want to play with site mailboxes, if you want to have it in a guided way, please go to the labs. And we also have the Office booth, obviously in the expo. I will be there 12:30-ish to 2-ish or longer if we have enough questions. If you have any detailed questions, if you want to talk about a specific scenario, just come down, find me there. Let's chat about it. There was a question? Question is, do site mailboxes show up in the GAL? And the answer is yes, they do show in the GAL. They show in the GAL as users, but one of the provisioning policy attributes that you have is you can define a prefix for the display name and the email alias, such that you can make sure that it's easy to differentiate them from actual users. And the default prefix is SMO dash. The site mailbox. I don't actually remember why we put the O in, but SMO dash is the default, and you can change it. Oh, sorry. Who is allowed to what? Who's? Oh, got it. Who can send mail to site mailbox? Anybody. You can. Can you restrict that? Yes. It's not part of the default management that we would allow end users to do. But like at the end, and that's why I was not super sure how to answer the journaling question as well. At the end, a site mailbox is a mailbox. So any commandlet you can run, almost any commandlet you can run against a mailbox, you can run against the site mailbox, which is, I'm pretty sure you can restrict who can send to that mailbox. We didn't build any UI for it. Only Exchange administrators could do stuff like prevent emails from being sent to the site mailbox. Good question. Who on-premise? Who does the setup between SharePoint and Exchange? It's the SharePoint administrator and the Exchange administrator. There are a bunch of scripts you have to run on either workload in order to make it happen, and like no workload could do it on its own. Just for the OAuth handshake, you would never be able to do that. Yep, that's on the blog, what you need to do. It's pretty, setting that up is actually pretty forward in the meantime. It's a bunch of scripts that tell you what to do. It was a lot of fun in the past. Like the first time I tried it, it took me a week. But now with the scripts, it's actually fun. There was a question back there. Is the mic turned on?
Hi. Hello? I have a question about certificates. If someone encrypts a message to a my team, and then I move that encrypted message into a site mailbox, or I select the site mailbox from the GAL, and is there a way to add a certificate to it and encrypt it? And what happens when I move that encrypted message into the site mailbox? Is it decrypted and copied, or does it maintain that encryption? Oh. And then my second question is, how does RMS come into play with site mailboxes? Okay.
Good question. Encryption of a site mail, encrypted email being moved to the site mailbox and RMS for site mailboxes. The site mailbox is a store. It doesn't, like I wouldn't know how you would apply a certificate to a site mailbox and then act as the site mailbox with that certificate, which is coming back to your initial question. If you have a encrypted message and you move it to a site mailbox, nothing on that message changes. So it's still encrypted. It's still encrypted to the same set of people. It's just as if you stored it somewhere else. So we're not doing any transformation, translation, anything there. Okay. As we keep the questions coming, here are some more resources, of course. And by now you probably have seen that at least 100 times. Although you can win something, and I have no idea if this QR code works, but you might try it. In any case, I would appreciate a lot if you gave feedback. Feedback always helps to make presentations better, so please keep it coming. Looking very much forward to read that. We still have 6 minutes left, and then I'll be at the expo for more personalized questions. There's a question there. Okay, so there was the question was about domains, and I think it was SharePoint and Exchange. Do they have to be in the same domain? Oh, do the users have to be in the same Exchange org as the site mailbox? No, they don't. As long as those two orgs are set up to work together, that's okay. Also, you didn't ask the question, but it's one that comes up often. Do SharePoint and Exchange have to be in the same domain? They don't. As long as the SharePoint form and the Exchange first are set up such that you can establish a OAuth relationship, you're good. Like, they can be in totally different domains. It doesn't matter.
Do all the documents and emails show up in search within Outlook and then within search in SharePoint?
Very good question. If you search in Outlook and if you search in SharePoint, what do you actually find? So if you search in SharePoint, in like the homepage of a SharePoint site, you only find what SharePoint knows about, which really is the documents, the tasks, like anything that's on that SharePoint site. If you click on Mailbox and get into the overview, and you do a search, you're basically searching in that mailbox, so you only get what Exchange knows about. If you are in the Outlook client, your search results will give you everything that Outlook knows about, and that is all the emails with a full text content search and all the metadata for the document. So if your query string would be successful against the display name for a given document, you would find it. If it were in the content, you would not find it. Okay, question up there? Good question. What permissions does SharePoint need on the Exchange side and vice versa? As you do the OAuth setup through the scripts, SharePoint and Exchange app principals will have read-write permissions on the other system. So it's permission is limited to the app principal, but it's granted at the read and write level. Okay, I think those were probably all the questions. Thanks a lot. It was a lot of fun. We actually were able to make that a little more interactive. Very cool. Thank you. Oh, one more question.
I was just wondering if there's any integration for calendar or tasks between the site mailbox and the SharePoint site.
Good question. Is there a calendar and task integration for site mailboxes in SharePoint? The answer is no. For 2013, the integration is really focused on email and documents.